My name is Morgan Layton. I'm 33, a Brooklyn-based arts program director, and a woman whose last thread of family loyalty snapped on Christmas Eve right there on the front steps of my Aunt Laura's Palm Beach mansion. I was standing in 3-inch heels, holding a homemade bourbon pecan pie and a carefully packed bag of personalized gifts, when Laura opened the door and gave me that patented Layton look, equal parts pity and disdain. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. "We don't want you here," she said, her voice clipped and flawless, like the cut of her red Valentino dress. "Go ruin someone else's holiday." Behind her, I could see them. My mother, Catherine, arranging some over-designed centerpiece, Jackson refilling wine glasses like the perfect golden boy, and even Amber, my youngest cousin, laughing into her phone in the glow of the fireplace. The scene was pulled straight out of a luxury magazine warmth affluence tradition, except for the inconvenient fact that I had been cut from the frame. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just nodded, turned away, and walked back down the immaculate stone path flanked with LED-lit poinsettias. I didn't get 2 blocks before I called the one person who's never made me feel like an afterthought, my grandmother Matilda. Her voice came through clear and firm. "Come over, now. Let me back up a second. If you're new here, hit subscribe. I tell real stories about healing survival and what it takes to reclaim your life after being erased by the people who were supposed to love you the most. If you've ever felt like the family misfit, the scapegoat, or just the one who never quite made the Christmas card photo, this story's for you. Growing up, Layton looked glamorous from the outside. Our family owned one of the largest real estate firms on the East Coast. My father, Gregory Layton, was the type who measured success in decimal points and private jet fuel. My mother, Catherine, was a former model turned PR executive who orchestrated our family image like a symphony, every move curated, every smile polished. Jackson, my younger brother by 2 years, was the prodigy. Harvard Business School, Layton Holdings board member at 25. Magazine features. Flawless fiancée Charlotte, of course. She's as perfect as she is terrifying. And then there was me, Morgan the artist. Morgan, who once won a national painting competition at 16, only to be told by Dad that art was a hobby, not a life. Morgan, who got a scholarship to Parsons, but who was convinced by her mother that real women of value don't chase paintbrushes. So I pivoted, switched majors, took jobs that felt like swallowing sand just to prove I could be what they needed. But I never quite made it into their frame. After years of pretending I was okay with the scraps of their affection, I finally carved my own space. I now run a nonprofit that brings art programs to underfunded public schools in New York. I live in a loft I can barely afford, drink too much cheap red wine, and wear paint-stained jeans on weekends. But I'm happy, or I was, until that phone call from my mother in early December. "We think it's time," she said, her voice soft like cashmere over glass. "Come to Laura's this year. Jackson's bringing Charlotte. Amber has something to show you. It's time to put the past behind us." I hesitated. But then she said something that cracked my resolve. "Grandmother's asking about you. Matilda Layton, our family matriarch. Fierce, sharp. The only Layton who ever treated me like I mattered. She used to sneak me out to see indie gallery shows when I was in high school. Let me paint murals in her garden shed. When I was 10, she gave me a tiny gold necklace with a charm shaped like a palette. I still wear it when I need courage. But over the last year, her health had declined. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It was bad. And if she wanted me there, I would go. So I went all in. I spent weeks preparing those gifts, hand-framed childhood photos, rare art books, a playlist of Christmas music we grew up with. For Amber, I printed and bound a custom guidebook to arts colleges with notes on scholarship deadlines. For my mother, I restored her mother's old portrait photograph, touched up digitally and framed with brass. And for my father, yes, even him, I found a first edition copy of his favorite business memoir. I even wrote a card for each person, and nothing sappy but sincere. Bridges, olive branches, hopes. But apparently I miscalculated the architecture of forgiveness. So there I was, Christmas Eve, standing in a driveway that probably cost more than my student loans, being told I didn't belong. And the truth is, it wasn't a shock. Just confirmation. The Laytons had made it clear in one exclusion after another that I was a reminder of something they didn't want to face. Maybe it was the divorce. Maybe it was the fact that I'd walked away from their version of success. Maybe it was simply easier to leave the misfit out of the picture. I drove away with my pie still intact, but my heart cracked in more ways than I had words for. That's when I called Matilda. Her voice was low but solid. "Come, not to the main house, my cottage. You remember the gate code?" I did. I always do. Her cottage sits at the far end of the Leighton estate, past the rose garden, and down a winding stone path. It's nothing like the main house, smaller, older walls, lined with books and oil paintings. It smells like lavender and turpentine. It smells like home. When she opened the door, she took one look at me, dressed up, shaking, still holding that damn pie, and pulled me into a hug that shattered me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I shouldn't have come." "No," she said. "They shouldn't have pushed you out." We sat. She made tea. And I told her everything. She didn't cry. Matilda never cried. But something in her changed that night. "You know," she said finally, "when I was your age, they tried to push me out too. Gregory didn't always run Leighton Holdings. That was supposed to be mine." I blinked. I had never heard that before. Back then, she continued, a woman leading a real estate firm was unheard of. They said I'd tank the company, so I stepped aside, gave them the face they needed. But I didn't give up control. I just waited, watched, and protected what mattered. She stood up, slowly went to the drawer near her writing desk, and pulled out a thick envelope. This was supposed to wait till after she said, referring, I realized, to her death. "But you deserve to see it now." Inside were legal papers, trust documents, ownership records, signatures. I stared. "This is control of the Matilda Leighton Foundation," I said slowly. "Not just that," she said. "It's the voting rights to 49% of Leighton Holdings. Through that foundation." My world tilted. She looked at me steady. "You're not out, Morgan. You're the future. But I need you to decide, are you ready to take it?" I didn't speak. I couldn't. The room spun. The heat of betrayal and the cold shock of legacy crashed together in my chest. Everything I thought I'd lost suddenly, terrifyingly, was being handed back. But not as a gift, as a responsibility. I looked down at the gold charm on my necklace, the tiny artist's palette, a symbol of who I'd been before the world told me to be someone else. And I realized maybe it was time to stop asking to be let in. Maybe it was time to build a new frame and decide who deserved to be in it. That night, I slept in the cottage, curled under my grandmother's quilt, the legal documents on the nightstand beside me. And in the morning, I didn't just wake up to Christmas. I woke up to a war I didn't ask for, but might finally be ready to win. Next. The fallout begins, Jackson, Charlotte, and the first cracks in the perfect Leighton legacy. I didn't sleep that night, not a minute. After Grandma Rose made her announcement, it felt like the whole world tilted on its axis. Somewhere between the guests' shocked gasps, my mother's frozen expression, and the weight of my grandmother's hand steadying mine, something cracked open inside me. For the first time in my life, someone in that ballroom, hell, someone in that family stood up for me in public, and not just with words, but with action that couldn't be taken back, rewritten or dismissed. $15 million and a foundation in my name. That wasn't just a gift. That was a statement. And that statement sent my entire family spinning. By morning, the emails started coming in. Some from family friends pretending to check in, but really fishing for gossip. Some from old classmates who'd seen the clip floating around social media, the part where Grandma Rose said my name and director of the Rose Thompson Foundation for Arts Access in the same breath. But the ones that made my stomach twist were from my parents. 2 emails, cold, sterile. From my father, "We need to meet. This situation must be rectified." From my mother, Morgan, "This is not how we resolve things. Your behavior last night was deeply disappointing." My behavior, I hadn't said a word, just stood there. But I guess in our family, silence with backbone counted as rebellion. I stayed in Bushwick for a few days after the party, half expecting my father to show up at my door like he owned the lease. He didn't, but Jason did. And that surprised me. He came alone, no Charlotte, no driver, no pretense. Just my brother in jeans and a hoodie, looking more like the teenager I remembered than the man in the tailored suits he'd grown into. I almost didn't answer the buzzer. But I did. And when I opened the door, he didn't speak right away. Just looked around my tiny apartment with its paint-streaked walls, mismatched furniture, and stacks of sketchbooks on every surface. "This is where you live," he finally said. I nodded. "Yeah, glamorous, right?" He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. "No, I mean, it's real. You made something out of nothing, Morgan. That takes guts." I didn't know what to say to that. Jason had never talked to me like that before. Not as the golden son or the corporate heir or the next in line. Just as my brother. He sat on the edge of the couch and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't think I can do it anymore." "Do what?" "This whole image. The business. The perfect son routine. I'm 30. I haven't made a single real decision that wasn't signed off by Dad or aligned with the brand." He looked at me, then eyes tired. "I was happy for you last night, and I was jealous. You're living your truth. I don't even know what mine is anymore. It would have been easy to gloat, to rub it in." But the sadness in his voice punched a hole through my resentment. We sat in silence for a while before he said he needed to go back. Charlotte's parents were still furious about the whole thing. "They're not sure marrying into chaos is the best move right now," he joked, but there was pain behind it. I asked if he loved her. He said he didn't know. I believed him. That week changed everything. Grandma Rose moved fast. Her lawyer reached out to me directly. There were papers to sign, bank accounts to set up, a board to assemble. I was director in title, but she wanted me actively involved, curating programs, hiring staff, making calls. She was building something real. And she wanted it in my hands, not just as legacy, but as resistance. Resistance against the sanitized, soulless version of success that our family had peddled for decades. But of course, the Thompsons weren't about to let it go quietly. A few days later, I got a formal notice from my father's legal team challenging the terms of the estate. Buried in legalese was the same old message: "You don't belong in this family if you don't play by our rules." The problem was the rules had changed, and I had Rose in my corner. She called me the night I got the notice. Her voice was calm, but there was a fire behind it. "Let them try," she said. "They'll lose." I dotted every I and crossed every T, and even if they drag it out in court, they'll never take away the truth of what we've started. I asked her why she'd waited so long to make a move like this. She paused, then said something I'll never forget. "Because I needed you to find your voice first. Otherwise, it wouldn't have lasted." And just like that, I understood. The foundation wasn't just about art access or public image or estate battles. It was about building something with roots, something that couldn't be erased with a dismissive comment or a dry smile across a crystal flute. We launched the foundation within 3 weeks. Grandma insisted we move fast. Her health was deteriorating faster than any of us expected. But her mind sharp as a blade. She reviewed every budget, approved every hire, and personally wrote welcome letters to every child enrolled in the first round of classes. She even selected the first building, a loft in Chelsea with light-soaked windows and creaky floors that reminded her of the school where she'd taught in her 20s. "Art needs space to breathe," she told me. "This place breathes." We painted the walls white and laid down second-hand rugs. We used folding tables for classes, plastic chairs, and old easels donated by a retired artist friend of hers. But when the first kids walked in, eyes wide, hands already itching for crayons or paint or clay, it didn't matter that nothing matched. It mattered that they were seen, that someone had made space for them. I was halfway through a class one Tuesday afternoon when the door buzzed. I wiped my hands and went to answer. Charlotte stood outside holding a tote bag and looking like she'd just walked off a museum brochure. I braced myself. I hadn't seen her since the engagement party. "Hi," she said simply. I brought snacks, in a monogrammed tote bag. I raised an eyebrow. "You're brave walking into enemy territory with gluten-free muffins." She laughed, then offered a small shrug. "I meant what I said at the party. I really do believe in what you're doing. And honestly, this place feels more real than any boardroom I've ever sat in." I let her in. She stayed for the whole class. She didn't just watch. She got on the floor with the kids, rolled up her sleeves, helped mix paints, listened to their stories. When it was over, she turned to me with a look I hadn't seen before, soft, searching. "I want to help," she said. "Not as Jason's fiancé or as a Thompson by association, as someone who cares about making things better." And that's how the second unexpected alliance of this war began. While my parents plotted legal tactics, Charlotte joined our board of advisors. She connected us with grant programs, museum liaisons, and even offered to fund a pilot mentorship program for teen artists. The irony wasn't lost on me. The girl raised in old money, becoming the bridge for kids who'd never set foot in a gallery before. But with every step forward, the pushback grew louder. My parents launched a media campaign, small, subtle, but unmistakably aimed at controlling the narrative. Misguided granddaughter headlines floated on real estate blogs and social columns. There was talk about Grandma Rose being manipulated in her final years. A whisper campaign full of insinuations and empty concern. The worst came when I received an anonymous envelope in the mail. Inside were copies of my college transcripts, a photo of my old apartment building, and a scrawled note, "Some leaders lead, some just pretend." It was meant to shake me, to make me feel small again, but instead it made me furious. That night, I painted for the first time in weeks. Not for a commission, not for an exhibit, just for me. I filled a canvas with jagged lines, raw colors, chaotic shapes. At the center, I painted a single red thread running through everything tangled, frayed, but unbroken. When I stepped back, I realized it was the first time I'd painted without fear of being dismissed. That red thread, that was Rose. That was me. That was all the kids in our program finding their voice for the first time. We hung it in the lobby the next morning. No plaque, no explanation, just a symbol. And slowly things started to shift. The press began writing about the foundation's work instead of the family drama. Schools reached out. Donors got interested. And Jason. He began rerouting Thompson Properties projects toward green initiatives and affordable housing. Quiet changes, but real ones. I knew the war wasn't over. I knew my parents would regroup, find another angle, come at us again. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of them. I had my voice. I had allies. And I had purpose. And then just as we were preparing for our first major exhibit, Grandma Rose collapsed. The doctor said the cancer had spread faster than expected. She'd been holding on with sheer force of will. But her body was tired, too tired. When I visited her at home that night, she looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes still fierce. "I'm not done yet," she whispered. "I need to be at the opening. I need to see what we've built." "Grandma!" "No. Listen to me. This is more than a gallery. This is our rebellion." She squeezed my hand. "Promise me you'll finish what we started." I nodded through tears I hadn't realized were falling. "I will." The next day we ordered a private ambulance. She would be at that opening, one way or another. The morning of the exhibit felt like standing on the edge of something huge. It wasn't fear exactly. It was closer to that tingling sensation before a first kiss or stepping on stage when the lights are already up. Half thrill, half nausea. We'd been working around the clock for weeks. The space smelled like varnish and fresh flowers. Artworks from over 40 students lined the walls. Ceramics mixed media ink oil. Graffiti pieces, even one enormous collage, made entirely of found objects from their neighborhoods. We didn't edit their voices. We didn't make things palatable. This show wasn't curated to impress critics. It was curated to reflect truth. Grandma Rose had insisted on calling the show Thread. The word was printed in big red capital letters across the main entrance banner. Because we all carry something, she'd said. Grief, memory, hope our lives are stitched together by invisible threads. Some snap, some hold. But they're always there. That morning, the ambulance arrived right on time. She refused a wheelchair. Instead, she stood between two nurses in her tailored navy coat, a brooch on her collar that looked like a tiny silver tree. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were clear proud. She walked into that gallery like she owned the earth beneath it, because in some ways she did. The gallery filled quickly. Community members, teachers, a few big-name donors, local press. Even a rep from the mayor's office showed up. And yes, the Thompsons came too. My mother and father trailing just behind Jackson and Charlotte. They kept their distance at first, hovering near the refreshments table, like royalty lost at sea. But I caught my mother glancing toward Rose more than once, her face unreadable. We didn't do speeches, we did stories. Every student had their moment standing beside their work, sharing what inspired them. One boy, Theo, stood beside a rusted metal sculpture of a subway car, explaining how he'd spent nights sleeping on the E-train last year before landing in foster care. Another girl showed a portrait of her older brother drawn in charcoal and rage. He was currently awaiting trial. "I made this," she said quietly, "because I don't want to forget him just because he messed up." There was no pity in the room, no soft music, just truth. And truth, it turns out, speaks louder than reputation. As I moved through the crowd, accepting hugs, shaking hands, sharing moments with the kids and their families, I spotted someone lingering near the back. Miles Carter, my old art teacher from high school. The one who'd once told me that no one could take away what I put on canvas, not even my parents. I hadn't seen him in over a decade. "You did it," he said simply when I walked over. I smiled. "No, they did." He nodded toward the piece hanging above the staircase, a tangled swirl of red threads weaving through broken glass and fabric. One of mine. The only personal piece I'd submitted. "You healed something with that," he said. "Not just in you. In a lot of people." I swallowed hard. I didn't expect it to hit like this. He leaned in. "Because you never saw yourself as the anchor. But tonight you are." By the time Grandma Rose took a seat beneath that same piece, the entire room felt like it was holding its breath. Not because we told it to, but because the presence of something sacred had arrived. That's when my father made his move. He stepped forward, crisp suit-polished shoes, the kind of man who could sell sand to a desert. "May I say a few words?" he asked already, grabbing a mic off the podium near the back wall. I froze. Rose didn't. She leaned forward slightly in her chair and said no. It wasn't loud, but it echoed. People turned. My father's face stiffened. "I think the board and our investors would appreciate." "There are no investors here," she said. "Just people. Artists, children, but the Leighton name." She stood. No support this time. Just fury and elegance wrapped in the same fragile frame. "Gregory, if you care so much about the family name, maybe you should have protected the only member of this family who's done something worth remembering." And just like that, the room exploded in whispers. He didn't speak again. He set the mic down and left. My mother followed after a few seconds, heels clicking like judgment behind him. Jackson stayed. So did Charlotte. The rest of the night was electric. Donors who'd once flirted with the foundation became concrete supporters. Schools signed up on the spot for spring programs. One city council member asked if we'd consider expanding statewide. For the first time in my life, people weren't talking around me or above me. They were listening to me. They were listening to these kids. But the high didn't last. The next day I got a call from our PR contact. Someone had leaked financial irregularities tied to the foundation's funding structure, specifically tied to Rose's trust. Headlines hit that afternoon, Eris's Arts Foundation under scrutiny. Subtweets exploded. Nepotism disguised as philanthropy. Granddaughter of NYC real estate mogul, accused of laundering reputation through kids' art. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I rushed to Rose's apartment. She was in bed, more tired than I'd ever seen her. "It's Gregory," she said. "He's trying to scare you, or at least stall your momentum." "But it's working," I whispered. "People are pulling out." Even Theo's foster parent called and asked if it's safe for him to keep coming. Her fingers found mine. "Then you fight, not with PR firms, with truth." She handed me a file folder. Inside were original bank statements, dated transfer documents, emails, and board sign-offs from 3 different attorneys. "Everything is clean," she said. "But the game isn't about truth. It's about who screams it loudest." I knew what I had to do. That night I went live. No handlers, no filters. Just me, a bare face, and the original documents on camera. I told the story. I explained the foundation's structure. I showed the files. But more importantly, I told them about the kids. I told them about Theo and Lila, and the girl who sculpted her grief into subway cars. I talked about art as survival, as resistance. I told them this was bigger than me, and if they were going to cancel me, they better do it knowing exactly what they were shutting down. The video got 3.7 million views in 48 hours. Suddenly, people started speaking up. Parents, teachers, social workers, even Charlotte, who recorded a message about the foundation's transparency and impact. Jackson went a step further. He offered an independent audit of the trust through his own firm. That got picked up by Business Insider. Then the tide turned. By the weekend, the backlash against the smear campaign was fiercer than the original wave. People were angry not at me, but at what the attempt to silence me symbolized. That even now, in 2025, the moment a woman from a powerful family dared to stand up with something authentic, the system tried to shred her. People saw through it. And they weren't having it. Still, the damage had been done. Rose's condition worsened. She barely spoke. Her fingers grew too thin to hold a pen. But when I visited that Friday, she smiled faintly and motioned for her phone. She typed a single sentence and showed me, "Threads hold longer than bloodlines." I sat beside her until she drifted into sleep. And that night, I dreamed of the painting I hadn't finished, the one of the red thread. In the dream, it wasn't tangled anymore. It stretched clean across a canvas, tying hundreds of smaller hands together. When I woke up, I knew what the final piece of our first exhibition had to be. But I also knew Rose might not live to see it. And that's where I'll take you next. It was the middle of February when Grandma Rose passed away. The gallery was in mid-prep for our spring youth showcase. The Chelsea space was buzzing with new students, new mentors, and more grant money than we'd ever thought we'd see in year one. But despite all that growth, every breath felt like it was being pulled through a sieve. We all felt it coming. She'd been fading in pieces, a little less each week. Her voice thinning, her hands trembling, her presence shrinking, but never her energy, never that fire in her eyes. And then, just like that, it was gone. She died peacefully, we were told, in her sleep. But when I got the call, the room still dropped out from under me. I was at the gallery standing in front of Theo and a few other kids explaining how we were going to paint ceiling tiles with scenes from their neighborhoods. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew the number. When I saw the words "time of death," I walked straight outside down the fire escape and cried in the alley. I didn't care who saw me. I wasn't ready. I still had things I needed to tell her, things I still needed her to help me figure out. The funeral was scheduled for the following Sunday. My family handled it like a press conference. Sleek black cars, a flower budget that could cover 6 semesters of college, a seating chart more political than personal. But I didn't care about any of that. What mattered was her will. What mattered was what she left behind and to whom. I expected it to be messy. I expected my parents to contest things. But I wasn't prepared for what actually happened. Her lawyer, Sophia Perez, a sharp, no-bullshit woman in her 40s, with a quiet voice and eyes like courtroom knives, called me the day before the reading and asked if we could meet privately. She showed up to the gallery after hours, dressed like she had no time for small talk. "There's something I think you should see before tomorrow," she said, laying a worn leather folder on the table between us. It was handwritten. Rose's personal journal entries scanned and organized by year. Notes she'd scribbled on legal pads, envelopes, even old receipts. Sophia had compiled it over the last 3 years. She knew the battle would come, Sophia said. She wanted her reasons, her heart, to be documented. Not just the legal paperwork, the spirit behind the decisions. We sat there together for almost 3 hours, reading page after page. She wrote about me, about Jackson, about Gregory, about being a woman in power before people knew what to call it, about being silenced, tolerated, underestimated, about how she had planned every piece of the estate, not just for wealth distribution, but for moral repair. Her words weren't just sentimental, they were razor sharp. She saw the family rot long before I ever could. And then in one entry, dated a year ago, to the day she wrote something that hit me so hard, I had to stop reading. "Morgan doesn't know it yet, but she's already stronger than any man in this family. She just doesn't trust that strength. Not yet. When she does, they'll either change or fall. And I'm good with either." I went to the reading of the will the next morning with a clarity I hadn't had in years. The room was full. My father sat at the head of the table, still believing titles mattered. My mother, expression frozen. Jackson and Charlotte beside each other, holding hands like they'd already braced for the fallout. Amber sat next to Aunt Laura, chewing gum like it was a protest. Sophia entered and started reading. First, the small things, keepsakes, jewelry, art. Then the donations, $5 million to public libraries, $3 million to women's shelters. Then came the big one. To my granddaughter, Morgan Layton, I leave my shares in Layton Holdings. 49% voting control. Full authority through the foundation's legal structure. No conditions. My father stood. "This is absurd," he said, voice tight. "That structure was created without full family board consent." Sophia raised a single eyebrow. "Actually, Mr. Layton, your mother began that trust in 2006. It's been active for nearly 2 decades. Its bylaws are protected under state nonprofit statutes and corporate exemptions. The shares were held there legally and transparently. You signed off on its formation." He looked like he'd been slapped. My mother didn't move. She just stared ahead like she wasn't really there. Jackson exhaled almost in relief. Charlotte whispered something to him I couldn't catch. There were more bequests, some to friends, some to causes. But none of it could eclipse the room's temperature after that. It had dropped, frostbite cold. After the reading, my father cornered me in the hallway. "You think this makes you some kind of savior?" "No," I said. "Just someone finally standing in the room." He narrowed his eyes. "You won't hold it. You don't have the spine. You're an artist. You lead with feelings. That gets people killed in business." I nodded slowly. "Good thing I'm not leading a business. I'm leading a purpose." He stepped closer. "You're going to destroy everything this family built." And for the first time, I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Maybe that's the point." I left without another word. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. We prepared for the annual Leighton Holdings stakeholder meeting, my first as a voting power. My presence there wasn't symbolic. I had actual say, actual pull, and that scared the hell out of the old guard. But I wasn't showing up to torch everything. I wasn't angry for revenge's sake. I was angry because no one had ever asked whether our family's empire actually helped anyone outside its shareholders. Spoiler, it didn't. So I went into that meeting with one goal: redistribution. A portion of our real estate assets would be converted into community development zones. A new profit-sharing program would be introduced for low-level employees, janitors, security guards, receptionists, people who'd never been invited to the table. And 5% of all luxury development profits would be funneled back into the foundation's education initiatives. The board pushed back. My father was livid. He tried to filibuster the vote, but Jackson surprised everyone. He stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "It's time. We've done it the old way for decades. This is better." He voted with me. It was a narrow pass, but it passed. Later that night, we stood on the roof of the gallery. Just the two of us. "I didn't do it for you," he said. "I did it because I'm tired of pretending my life means something just because I inherited a title." I smiled. "That's enough." He pulled something out of his pocket, a tiny framed photo. It was of us. As kids, covered in paint, laughing in the garden behind Rose's cottage. "I kept it," he said. "Even when I was angry at you for leaving, I never forgot who we were before all this." I didn't cry. I wanted to, but there was still more to do. The final showcase of the season was approaching. We decided to make it a tribute to Rose. We called it The Last Thread. Every student submitted a piece that reflected something she taught them about strength, about voice, about fighting back. I painted again too. One final piece. A canvas taller than me, covered in white. At the center, a single red thread weaving through hundreds of small black ink outlines of hands, child hands, adult hands of all shapes. Reaching, connecting. We hung it in the front window. And the night before the show opened, I stood alone in the gallery staring at it, wondering if it was enough. If any of this was enough to carry what she'd left behind. That's when my phone buzzed. A notification. From a private number. A single image. It was a scan of internal documents from Leighton Holdings' years-old acquisitions tied to shell companies. Redlined notes in my father's handwriting. Misuse of employee pensions. Inflated valuation reports. And a message: "You're not done. This is where it starts." I didn't sleep that night. I sat there on the floor of my apartment, cross-legged with a blanket wrapped around me like armor. The scanned documents pulled up on my laptop screen lit up like some kind of modern gospel. Phrases jumped out like blinking warnings: diverted employee funds, inflated valuation for acquisition. Offshore accounts, see Redco Holdings. It was a map of everything I had feared about the old Leighton Empire, but worse. It wasn't just shady, it was predatory. It wasn't just greed. It was theft disguised in corporate jargon and quarterly bonuses. I didn't know who had sent it. There was no signature, no IP trace, just a file labeled "for when you're ready to burn it down." And maybe I was. But I also knew that if I mishandled this, I wouldn't just burn my father, I'd torch the thousands of people who worked under him. Janitors, building security, administrative staff. People like Maria the night cleaner, who always left fresh coffee by the door of our gallery when she finished her shift. Or Malik, the construction foreman who had shared his son's sketchbook with me last fall, asking if there were scholarships. If I came out with this, it had to be precise, clean, unassailable, and it had to be mine. The next morning, I called Sophia Perez. She was quiet for a moment as I told her what I'd found, then asked me to forward the file. I could hear her rustling papers in the background. "I know this handwriting," she said after a long pause. "This is real. This is dangerous. And if you go forward, they will fight dirty." "Then we fight cleaner," I said, but louder. She agreed to loop in a whistleblower law firm, Reeves & Barrow. Their rep, an ex-DOJ investigator named Naya, looked like someone who could kill a man with a ballpoint pen. She spoke in sentences like scalpels, and I trusted her within 20 minutes. "You can't do this through press first," she said. "You need to build it legally airtight, otherwise it becomes a smear, and your father turns himself into the victim." We began compiling a case. Quietly. We pulled bank records, payroll documents, press releases from the years in question. Nia hired forensic auditors to trace the shell companies. I requested an emergency board review of the previous year's expenditures publicly, under the guise of budget transparency. It took 3 weeks. In that time, the gallery kept running. Kids kept painting. Theo made a comic book. Lila was offered a scholarship to a pre-college summer program. The world kept spinning, but I felt like I was holding a grenade in my chest pin halfway pulled. Charlotte was the only one who knew outside of Sophia and the legal team. She came by one night with takeout and sat across from me at my tiny kitchen table, watching me scroll through statements and legal briefs. "Do you ever feel like you're becoming them?" I asked suddenly. She blinked. "You mean powerful?" "No, I mean calculated. Strategic, like every word you say is a move on a chessboard." She considered that. "I used to think strategy was the opposite of integrity. Now I think it's what integrity needs to survive in this kind of world." I didn't know whether to feel comforted or terrified by that. When the evidence was ready, I made the choice we'd go public at the Leighton Holdings annual spring gala. Not because I wanted drama, but because it was the one night the entire board, all major investors, every PR team, and about half the city's media elite would be in the same room. And because Rose had always said, if you're going to speak truth to power, say it into the mic they already turned on. The night of the gala, I wore black. Simple. No jewelry, except for one thing, her charm necklace, the gold artist's palette she gave me when I was 10. I hadn't worn it in weeks. That night it felt like armor. The room was nauseatingly opulent. Chandeliers like glass galaxies, waiters in gloves, string quartet in the corner, playing something beautiful and hollow. My father stood by the bar, laughing with a developer from Atlanta. My mother made circles like she was running for office. Jackson and Charlotte kept close to the board members. And then it was my turn. I was scheduled to speak last as the new director of the foundation to thank donors and share our impact. But I had rewritten the speech the night before. It was still about impact, just not in the way anyone expected. I stepped up to the podium. No teleprompter, no cue cards, just me and a room full of sharks dressed in silk. I started with the truth. I told them about the kids, about the programs, about how art had saved my life more than once. I showed a few slides, photos of gallery sessions, testimonials from students. The crowd was warm, comfortable. Then I changed gears. I was raised in a family that taught me about legacy, I said. But what they didn't teach me was the difference between legacy and reputation. One is earned, the other is curated. People shifted in their seats. I pulled up a slide, just text, Redco Holdings, 2017-2020. The room tightened. I walked them through it. Slowly, clearly. I showed the acquisitions, the shell companies, the pension diversions. I read directly from my father's notes. I cited statements from the auditors. No accusations, just data. And then I said, you all know my father, Gregory Leighton. Many of you have profited alongside him. That's fine. What's not fine is pretending those profits didn't come from harm. And now you know. The room was dead silent. My father stood. You've made your point. I'm not done, I said, locking eyes with him. Because this isn't about revenge. It's about repair. Every dollar diverted will be audited. Every affected employee will be reimbursed with interest. And the board will vote on leadership restructuring tonight. You could hear someone exhale across the room. I finished with one line. Legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you answer for. Then I stepped down. Within 20 minutes, press were scrambling. Phones were lighting up. The board convened behind closed doors. Jackson came out pale but firm. He's out, he said quietly. They voted, effective immediately. My father left the gala alone. No driver, no speech. Just a man in a suit whose empire finally collapsed under the weight of its own silence. That night, I walked home alone. I could have taken a car, but I needed the air. The city buzzed around me like it had a heartbeat. For the first time, I didn't feel small in it. When I got home, I found an envelope under my door. No return address. Inside was a photo, black and white, grainy. It was Rose, standing in front of the original Leighton Holdings building in 1967, hair pulled back, briefcase in hand, eyes staring dead into the camera, like she knew exactly how long it would take to get back what was hers. On the back in faded ink were 4 words, "Now it's your turn." I stood in my kitchen holding that photo and realized this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. And somewhere out there, someone still wasn't finished with me. 3 months after the gala, I walked into the Leighton building, not as a visitor, not as a tolerated family name, but as a voting partner with executive oversight. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like responsibility. Legacy, like Grandma Rose said, is something you answer for. I wasn't here to pose behind a glass desk. I was here to clean house and build something new. The boardroom still had that heavy smell, polished paper, and power. Same walls, same long mahogany table, same glass water bottles lined up in soldier formation. But the energy different. Gregory's nameplate was gone. In its place sat a temporary brass plate that read simply, Foundation Representative, M. Leighton. I didn't sit at the head. I took the middle seat. Center of the table. I wanted them to see I wasn't here to dominate. I was here to balance. The agenda was clear: restructure existing projects to meet equitable community development goals. Review public-facing commitments. Approve full employee reimbursement for pension misappropriations. Finalize the legal departure of my father with full clawbacks from private accounts. It wasn't a warm meeting, but it was a clean one. Afterward, I walked the halls. It hit me this place wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by habits, and habits are harder to kill than men. That's when I decided we weren't going to renovate this company. We were going to retire it. The foundation would spin off from Leighton Holdings completely. We would restructure as our own nonprofit umbrella, absorbing the best projects, releasing the rest. We'd sell the naming rights to the Leighton building and reinvest the proceeds into creative youth spaces across the boroughs. Not in Midtown, but in the zip codes where art programs had been slashed from public schools first. I didn't ask for permission. We just did it. We called it the Threadline Initiative. Each center named after a working-class artist from New York's overlooked history. The first, the Alma Thomas Studio in the Bronx. Then the Basquiat Garage in Flatbush. Then the East River Print House. We gave the buildings life. Murals, open windows, bus passes for the kids, legal aid for undocumented families, on-site therapy free. The city started noticing. So did other cities. And that's when I got the email. It was from a city commissioner in Detroit. Subject line, "Can we build threadlines here?" It was never about the Leightons, not really. It was about what could grow once the soil wasn't poisoned. But even as things grew, I never stopped thinking about the photo, the one of Rose outside the building in '67. I'd framed it, placed it right above my desk in our Chelsea office. Some days I swore she was smirking at me, like she knew how hard this would be, like she'd always known I would do it even when I didn't. Then came the letter, handwritten, no signature, just a single line. Power never dies, it mutates. Attached was a photocopy of a check dated 2 weeks before my father was voted out, issued by one of our subsidiary accounts, paid out to a small media firm in New Jersey. The same firm that ran the smear articles about me during the foundation launch. The same firm now rebranding itself under new ownership. I took the file straight to Sophia. She read it, then looked up with something close to fury. "You think he's trying to worm his way back in?" "No," I said. "I think he never left." Gregory wasn't trying to reclaim the company. He was trying to reclaim the narrative. Reputation, remember, curated, not earned. It didn't take long to confirm. He'd partnered with a private equity group, whispering about starting a legacy-neutral firm, one that would be apolitical, heritage-free. Translation: a way to seduce investors tired of my reforms without carrying the Leighton name. He was building a shadow version of what we dismantled. This time we didn't take it public. We went grassroots. We launched a campaign, "This city has seen enough." Videos of former employees sharing how they were impacted by Gregory's decisions. Street murals commissioned by threadline teens showing the difference between power and purpose. Charlotte used her contacts to run a docuseries on urban exploitation. And Jackson. God bless Jackson did something I didn't see coming. He testified at a Senate Ethics Committee hearing about corporate fraud and generational power abuse. He sat under those glaring lights and said, "My father taught me how to win. My sister taught me why that wasn't enough." It went viral. That week, Gregory's new firm lost 4 major backers. A 5th dropped when we published a joint audit comparing our equity reinvestment rates. Our ratio, 17%. His 0.3%. The narrative was ours again. But here's the thing, no one tells you about winning battles like this. It doesn't make you feel invincible. It makes you feel human. Exhausted, tender, rewired. I started painting again. Not for a campaign, not for a press backdrop. For me, I painted a series called Inheritance. 6 canvases, 1 for each phase of the story. 1, a locked door. 2, a red thread. 3, a gallery full of broken things made beautiful. 4, a shrub tree growing through concrete. A house with no roof but 100 windows. 6, a little girl standing at a podium with no microphone, just a paintbrush. We hung them at our 1-year anniversary show. And at the back of the room, standing against the wall like always, was Miles Carter, my old high school art teacher. He walked up to me afterward and said, "Still leading with feelings." I smiled, every damn day. And he said, "Good. That's where the truth lives." The show closed with one more surprise. Theo stepped onto the makeshift stage, now taller, his voice more grounded, and said he had something to share. He pulled out a piece of paper and started reading. "When I came to this place, I didn't know if I mattered. I knew I existed, but I didn't know if I mattered. Now I know. Because I get to create things that weren't here before I showed up. That's what this place gave me. A way to matter out loud." There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Afterwards, he gave me a hug that cracked something open in me again. The kind of hug that says, "I saw what you did, and I'm going to carry it forward." And maybe that's the whole point. You don't rewrite a family by winning arguments or taking board seats. You do it by changing what people think is possible. You do it by showing up over and over until your presence becomes louder than their silence. I left the gallery that night and walked past the mural the students painted for Rose. It's a massive tree with branches made of brushstrokes and hundreds of red threads tied into the roots. Each thread holds a name. Some are students, some are mentors, some are janitors, some are anonymous. I tied one last thread. Her name was the only one on it. Rose. And I whispered, "We're still pulling Grandma." Because we are. Story 2. My name is Emma. I'm 22. And on my birthday, my own father sold my laptop to buy my sister a new phone, then demanded I pay her college tuition. Before I tell you how they reacted when they found what I left on the kitchen table, tell me in the comments where you're viewing from. To understand why I did what I did, you need to understand my family. In our house, there were 2 daughters, but only one golden child. And it wasn't me. My younger sister Olivia could do no wrong. She was the sun, and I was the planet that was just expected to orbit her quietly, without complaint. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 little cuts over 22 years. For my 16th birthday, I got a stern lecture about the rising cost of car insurance for hers. After 6 months, she received the keys to a brand new sedan with a large red bow that was parked in the driveway. When Olivia wanted the newest iPhone, my parents said I was being frugal when I worked 2 part-time jobs during community college to save $1 and $200 for a powerful laptop for my design classes. They simply purchased it for her. The workhorse was me, the princess was her. On my 18th birthday, my mom's younger sister, Aunt Rachel, witnessed it all. She gave me a lovely journal that was bound in leather. She hugged me and said in a whisper, "Your grandpa was an accountant." "Always keep your own ledger," he said. "There is no disputing the math." Emma. I had no idea at the time that that advice would actually save my life. I began to write things down. Numbers, not just sentiments. I occasionally lent my dad $50, but it was never returned. I would contribute $200 toward groceries. That turned into a monthly requirement. Everything was included in the book. My 22nd birthday was the day everything went haywire. I was in my last grueling semester of university. I had spent my entire life on that laptop, and my thesis was due in a month. When my phone buzzed, I was at the library. My dad texted me about it. "Have you sold your laptop? A new phone is what Olivia needs. We still feed you, so be thankful." After reading it once, I read it twice. It was like being punched in the stomach, stealing my lungs' entire supply of air. I couldn't even process the anger before my hands began to shake. Another text message arrived. "By Friday, you will also pay her $6,000 tuition." After years of being twisted and bruised, something inside of me didn't simply shatter. Steel was the result. 2 words were typed back by me. "Not a chance." He responded right away. "Then leave. You're disconnected." It was over in an instant. I refrained from crying. It was the first time I didn't scream. I wasn't experiencing any emotional turmoil. Only a chilly, piercing clarity was present. When you've been pushed past your breaking point and realized you have nothing left to lose, you get a certain kind of clarity. I took a car home. I passed Olivia's room on my way. She was giggling and utterly unaware as she opened her brand new phone. I took a single duffel bag out of my own room. I packed my passport, my backup hard drive, a few changes of clothes, and my basic toiletries. After that, I went to my closet and took out a thick brown accordion folder from the back. All of the receipts, bank statements, with highlighted transfers and IOUs I had ever made them sign as a joke, were all inside. Aunt Rachel's guidance resulted in years of painstaking documentation. The ledger of my grandfather. I walked down to the kitchen and placed the folder squarely in the middle of the table. On the front, I had written in clean black marker for Mom, Dad, and Olivia. Then I walked out the back door, closed it softly behind me, and never looked back. My first call was to Aunt Rachel. Her voice was a balm on a wound. I didn't even know it was still bleeding. "You come here right now," she said. No questions asked. When I got to her small, cozy apartment, she just held me for a long time. Then, sitting on her couch with a cup of hot tea in my trembling hands, I pulled out my spare laptop. I opened a pre-written email, the one I had saved in my drafts for a day I hoped would never come. It was addressed to my grandmother Eleanor, my dad's mother, the formidable, no-nonsense matriarch of our family. I attached a single large PDF file, a scanned copy of every single page in that brown folder. My finger hovered over the send button. It was this. This was the point of no return. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and clicked the quiet little swoosh sound of the email. Leaving my outbox felt like a cannon blast. The next morning, my aunt's phone rang. My mom was the one. Hysterical. I didn't need to hear the words to know what was happening. I could picture it perfectly. Olivia, probably coming down for breakfast, would have been the first to see the folder. She'd open it out of curiosity. She'd see the bank statements showing thousands of dollars transferred from my savings account labeled Olivia's expenses. She'd see the receipts for her car repairs, her shopping sprees, all paid for from my paychecks. But the final blow, the secondary twist I had placed at the very back, was a document about her own trust fund, the one our grandfather had set up for both of us. It would show that after they had drained my college fund of $24,000, they had started chipping away at hers. The look of betrayal on her face must have been devastating. The realization that she wasn't just the golden child she was a pawn, just like me, used to keep us from ever comparing notes. I could imagine my dad, his face turning from red to white, as he realized this wasn't just an angry note. This was a prosecution. The hook for my story was his panicked calls. He was likely calling every relative, trying to spin the story, trying to paint me as the ungrateful, unstable daughter. But then, in the middle of their chaos, I did something they never expected. I went back and Rachel drove me. I walked right up to the front door and used my old key. I stepped inside. The 3 of them were in the living room, frozen in a tableau of panic and accusation. My old phone, which I'd left on the counter, was buzzing incessantly with calls from my dad's number. He was calling me from his own pocket. He saw me, and his face contorted with a mix of fury and relief. "I thank God you came to your senses. Now stop this nonsense." I held up a hand. I forgot something I said, my voice even. I walked past them, picked up my phone from the counter, and turned it off. Then I left my father dead in the eye. The numbers don't lie. Dad! And right on cue, as if summoned by the words themselves, the doorbell rang. I was the one who opened it. Standing on the porch was my grandmother Eleanor. Her face sat like granite, and beside her, a man in a crisp suit holding a briefcase. The family lawyer. She gave me a single respectful nod before her icy gaze fell upon her son Frank. She said, her voice cutting through the tension, "Emma was kind enough to provide me with a full accounting of your management of the family trusts. As the primary trustee, I am informing you that you are being removed. With instant effect. Mr. Davies here will handle the transition. We will be conducting a full audit, and any and all misappropriated funds will be returned to Emma and Olivia's accounts. Do you understand?" My dad just stared, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. My mom let out a sob. The power in the room had shifted so completely, it was almost silent. I hadn't needed to be rescued. I had simply brought in the law to witness the truth I had already laid bare. A day later, I met Olivia at a neutral coffee shop. She looked small and broken. "I'm so sorry, Emma," she whispered, twisting a napkin in her hands. "I never knew." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel a sting of resentment. I just felt a quiet sadness for both of us. "It's not your fault," I said. And I meant it. You were there. Trophy and I was there. Bank, we were just different kinds of tools to them. But from now on, I said, meeting her gaze, we tell each other the truth. It was the first shaky brick in a new foundation. 1 year later, on my 23rd birthday, my life looked nothing like I could have imagined. I worked well for a marketing company. Although it wasn't my ideal job, I earned it, and it was mine. Olivia and I were working on our relationship. We learned how to be sisters without our parents poisoning us while we were in therapy together. It was real, but it was difficult. I threw a small birthday party in my apartment. Despite its modesty, I had paid for everything in it myself. My grandmother gave me a thick envelope at the end of the evening. It contained a deed rather than cash. A deed to a little cabin my grandfather had purchased years ago in the mountains. He had always claimed to be saving it for me. "Emma, this isn't a gift," she said. She spoke in a softer tone than I had ever heard. "It's a tool. Tonight, go build anything you want with it." I remember that awful birthday text as I stand here telling you this. My savings, my laptop, and my sense of security were all taken by my father. But in exchange, he gave me something far more valuable: my liberty. He only cut, even though he thought he was cutting me off, the final link that bound me to a life that was gradually taking my life. What I lost is not the subject of my story. It has to do with what I was at last able to construct. I sincerely appreciate you hearing my tale. It's been a long journey, and sharing it makes it easier. I want to ask everyone a question. Have you ever needed to maintain your own peace with your family by establishing firm boundaries? Share your experience with me in the comments section below. Please like and subscribe for more stories if this one spoke to you. It really does mean everything.